Help to Adjust Inc. presents If Testimony Was a Person, the podcast where we talk with all kinds of professionals about their journey and how their personal life intersects with their professional life. Today, we have a guest who's a musician. This is a person who I saw at an event at Hofstra University, and he was rapping, and he was more than rapping. He also plays instruments and really was talking in his raps about some things that I think is missing in hip hop today. Mr. Dudley, known as Dudley Music, is our guest today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about where you were born and your childhood.
So I was born in Bayshore, Southside Hospital, but I grew up in Brentwood, and now I live in Farmingdale. I'm a Long Island bred and raised artist, and my roots are deep here, and I always try not to forget that and try to give back. But growing up, I grew up with my mother and my grandmother and my two other siblings. I have a twin, and I have a older brother who I love dearly. Shout out to you guys. And so along that path, I fell in love with music. I fell in love with education. I fell in love with bettering my community, and I tried to figure out how to set myself up to do that for the rest of my life, if I can. So
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Now, people who are listening, you have no idea by hearing this mild-mannered, soft-spoken brother speak. Hit me with a verse that will demonstrate. Could be like a.
Sure.
Give me like a 45 to 60 second that'll demonstrate what you do.
All right, so I'll talk about where I'm from. This is from a song called Bewood. I grew up in Bewood, L-I-N-Y, and I know it ain't the best place, but I love it, man, I can't lie. A place infested with police and people throwing up gang signs, a place where I from proper education at the same time. But whenever they make the news, they're doing what haters do, even though some things that they say is true. It would get me mad as hell when I turn to channel 12 and they only tell but the things that ain't going well. And when we excel, they never pay attention. And if they do, it's something that the news fails to mention. What's your intentions? Is it to keep my town from rising? Doesn't sound surprising since you're only recognizing all the violence. People are mindless. When they hear something that's horrible, they think the only good from Brentwood is that it's affordable. But that's not it. There's more to know. Now let me take you somewhere that reporters won't. The basketball courts of North Elementary. It was more than just sports for all of my friends and me. A place where we could go to build our self-esteem and talk about dreams that we hope to achieve eventually. And they won't take it to the spots where we skated, where the cops tried to gate it, because the cops always hated that was one of the places all of the skaters congregated. And just for that reason, my town should be top rated. Because a lot of people get mad at my hood, but you got to take the bad with the good. Yeah.
Man, that's something. You know, when I think about the movies that we watch, you know, popular culture, even books that we read, there's a protagonist and there's an antagonist,
Right.
and there's always this conflict.
Right.
And it's almost as if the news takes the same
Yeah.
position, like, you know, it's the good guys and the bad guys, and we got to tell about what the bad guys did.
Right.
And when you talking about communities of color in Suffolk
Right.
County and Nassau County, anywhere USA, it's a story of good guys versus bad guys, and often we feel scared when we listen to these stories about
Right.
somebody shot, somebody did this, somebody did that. It is scary because we all want our families to be all right, and you really pointed that out. Like, so the community of Brentwood where you grew up. Say a little bit about Brentwood and what the reputation of Brentwood is.
So it's funny. And I forget these things sometimes. When I wrote that, I was probably about 16 years old. I was in high school, and I felt the same way that a lot of people from my town and neighborhood felt, is that we are good-hearted people, hardworking people. We are very connected. We celebrate culture. We celebrate diversity. We have, all this amazing good about us. I've I've had a amazing childhood that I couldn't ask for a better one, and yet it just feels like there's this constant narrative being told about us by people that aren't from our communities, that says that there's nothing but crime. There's you know just a lot of negative stereotypes and you know just hate, I guess, and in a way that, like, I wanted to write something in an eloquent way, in a point that gets to the point of how we feel to pull from that emotion. In the other verse, I talk about how our soccer team won the we had the best at that time when I was in high school, the best record in the country of championships. We were undefeated for like years straight, and no other soccer team in the country had that. Our music program actually won a Grammy. I didn't. It was one day I'm walking through the hallways and I see there's a Grammy in the shelves and one in the hallway. I'm like, why is there a Grammy here? And I find out that every year the Grammys awards 2 schools in the country a Grammy for their programs. And so we have that and all these things that I know for certain these other towns don't have, and we do. And yeah, there's bad things that happen, but there's bad things that happen in your towns as well.
Was there a bunch of news coverage about the Grammy and the music program and soccer program?
I don't I don't remember ever hearing anything about the music program. I know that, like, when I was in the marching band, we won the state finals. Our marching band is very celebrated amongst the different schools. Our music program, this is crazy. I went to college and I'm studying. My professor printed out this article of I forgot what exactly it was about. But it was an article about music or music teaching, because I went for music education originally, and it was written by my music director in high school, and I'm in college in the city reading this article that so the I didn't even realize how blessed and how beautiful that I had these arts programs were. I know our science program, we had all these AP classes and things like that, and opportunities that for a place with our income, our regular household income, shouldn't have. But we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about how good our school district is. We talk about how we were hearing a lot of stories about how dangerous our school districts are. And part of it is having the humility to look and say, you know what, there is some truth in that. There is some problems, right? We should not, ignore those things. But it's also the language in which that we address that, the way that we have to have awareness of, or consciousness of, are we really saying this? And I say that in that verse, are you saying this to better my community? Are you talking about my community so that we get better? Or are you saying this so that other communities will look at us in a bad light and we inevitably get worse, And I really wanted to encourage the people in my community that, like, look, we're good, we're good. No matter what anyone says about us, it's just like with a family, right? Look, don't listen to what they say to you at school. I love you, right? You're going to be that. So I think that there's a lot of communities on the island that get a bad rep, and I think that it's, uh, sure, things happen, but I feel like there's things that happen in other towns that
Yeah.
don't get spoken about, and it's not spoken about in the same language as well.
You
So
know, you the the analogy that I was giving about conflict in a movie,
hmm
like you need this
yes,
essential conflict. When you tell a story of the teachers teaching and
yes,
students learning and achievement being at a high, or a music program that stands out
right,
amongst the entire Long Island, or there's no um, conflict to speak
right,
of there. And I
right.
really do believe that when there's no conflict to speak of, there's somehow less incentive.
Life is boring without conflict, right?
Right, right. There's less incentive for the news to say, we need to cover this.
Yeah,
We
we
need to
don't.
put this as one of the top stories, you know.
We can't have a utopia if we don't want a utopia, right? We can't be happy. We can't, we can't. And that's what's. I had this conversation about with hip hop, right? If you go back to, like, we always go back to, like, one of the biggest hits was like The Message, right?
Yeah.
And you know, with that early, one of the earliest, like, songs at that time, um, the antagonist was, was maybe the government for not, letting the Bronx burn, right, and not caring about the community and stuff. Um,
Just real quick,
yeah,
for the listeners who don't know,
hmm
The Message,
yeah,
1979, I believe.
probably, yeah,
The world was born with no, a child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. And the song talked about,
mm,
possibilities of going to prison, just the ills that were happening in the
mm-hmm,
community at the time, but not from the point of view that the people there were horrible people, but from the point of view that the community can swallow you up if you don't watch and be vigilant.
so they present an enemy, whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something to be
Mm-hmm.
vigilant of, something to fight against.
Right.
Public Enemy, right? Long Island, right? That's Long Island group, right? Fight the Power, right? There's now, I think a lot of early hip hop, which I love, was the antagonists was these systems that have created ghettos, that have created narratives that keep us from progressing um, in our communities. And eventually it turned into, okay, the antagonist is this rival gang. The antagonist is this dude in my community that's hating on me. The antagonist is this woman that won't let me live, right? So, and I have this conversation a lot with my manager I spoke to. It's like Eminem, right? Eminem can't talk about he can't really talk about the same things that a black artist can talk about, right? You can't, which I think we've seen that sometimes where a white hip hop artist might want to say, maybe talk about conflict of being in the ghetto and stuff. And for us, we can't perceive that because we're like, you really don't know. You might have grown up in a rough neighborhood, but you're not, you can't talk about being oppressed like a black artist in America at that time
Yeah.
was. So what Eminem did, his antagonist was his mom, right? His mom. He always talked about his mom, how his mom was neglectful to him, or he talked, he was always the antagonist might have been a woman that or his ex-wife or something like that. So he found, I think that because we're at the end of the day when we're making art, a lot of times we are making a story, right? Without this, this plot of the bad and the good, it's hard to do that, right? I remember I wrote a song once where I wrote a song called Unreliable, and the antagonist is my father, right? My father didn't do this for me, but he did this, and I think I was telling you earlier before the interview that I kind of had a relationship with my father. I don't have any animosity with my father, but I created this story to pull an emotion, right? to express an emotion and maybe even exaggerate it, right? Because I'm not a reporter. I'm not writing a biopic. I'm not writing a word for word,
it's not journalism.
journal, right?
Yeah.
It's not journalism, right? So we find ways to exaggerate the truth or emphasize something in order to pull an emotion.
Yeah.
That is part of it, right?
It's part of art.
Especially, and that only works because, like you said, we need, we kind of, our brain kind of tends to want to have good and bad. We're kind of getting in the point now, I think, that people are starting to realize, and I think that might be I'd love to hear your thought on it. I think just with mental health, people realize that, hey, that guy was mean to me. That guy was rude to me, but that doesn't make him a bad person. He maybe did that because of this. It doesn't justify it, but he did that for his own selfish reasons. He wasn't thinking about me. It's a little more complex than that's a bad person. That's a good person.
Yeah.
It's so even with that song, when I'm talking about the news and how the news does this and says, it's a little more complex than me just pointing the finger and said, the news, you guys got to stop. You guys are the reason for this.
You acknowledge that there's problems in the community in the song.
Right. There's definitely that. There's definitely other, we wouldn't even be here if there wasn't redlining in our communities. There wasn't all this other history that's led us to treating each other in this way, right?
Yeah.
So, but until we all, can look at things unbiasedly, and we enjoy hearing stories in that way. It's very hard to enjoy a story where there's not an antagonist and a protagonist, right?
Mm-hmm.
A story that's just like, hey, this is what happened. Like, that's why, reading books is important, because sometimes there's not an antagonist. A lot of times not an antagonist or protagonist. It's just something that I went through and I learned from, and I went through and I learned from. I don't put blame on someone else or on myself. And so, but in art, especially in hip hop, when that, you take that away, and it doesn't really feel like hip hop anymore. It doesn't feel like something that pulls an emotion out of me anymore. So
yeah, it's one of the things that when I look at art now, I'm talking about contemporary music. Sometimes there is, it's such a desire to, it almost feels like there's a desire to shock people, because so many topics have been talked about that now people are just going for the, what will grab people in the podcast world. If you can get somebody who's making everybody mad, disrespecting people, or even Kevin Samuel, you notice, this person wasn't, this person was talking about important topics, but was being kind of shocking the way he was approaching women, and being maybe even a little abusive in the way he was approaching women. So he became someone who was topping the charts because of that protagonist-antagonist thing, where if you're talking about just being a person that talks about important conversations, it can be hard to get to the top if you're not, having that dynamic.
Who's probably the best at not, who still has this ability? I think that, you can either choose to, because they say art disrupts the, what do they say? Art disturbs the, or disrupts the environment, kind of. And I think sometimes, you do that and it's because it's a reflection of how people think. It brings out, and that's why today, you have people that say stuff, and then, now there's tons of articles, interviews, and things about this subject that this one song was about. That's good art. It did a good job.
Right, it got people talking.
Getting people thinking and talking about something, as opposed to something that doesn't get us to talk about anything, right? So I don't want to I don't want to diminish myself or my music by in that way, by trying to do something just for the shock value. I would love that shock value for people to talk about my music and but I want it for the right reasons. One person I love is Kendrick Lamar, because he'll have that shock value, but the message behind what he says, and the reasoning behind what he says, you feel it. Jay-Z is a good example of someone who, he even says it in one of his songs. He said, I'm trying to remember the lyric exactly, but he pretty much says, like, if it were up to me, he said something like, I had to write this way and do this thing. But if it were up to me, I would lyrically be Common Sense or Talib Kweli, right? Who are known for talking about the communities and social consciousness and these
he talked about that
things.
Often.
And look at him now; he's doing that now.
Right. There was a verse where he's on Renegade. He says, do you listen to your fools listen to music or just skim through it? And he talks about how people. I just read a magazine that effed up my day because I'm trying to talk about a variety of things, but you all only want to hear me talk about one thing.
They're gonna come to, and that's the thing that if you think about Jay and his music early on, I'm sure he got people asking him like what was it like growing up with Biggie? What's it like selling drugs? What's it like growing up in the projects? That's what people want to hear about, as opposed to what's it like running a business? What's it like, putting people on and empowering people and so I don't want anybody coming up to me and saying and asking those questions right now. I would love for people like you who say, hey, I heard that song and like I want to know about, I really want to be known for contributing to the conversations that will help us gain a better perspective on certain things. I don't really want to I want my ethos in my art, I guess. And some people don't have to, and that's okay.
And speaking of the idea of perspective, you reference older hip hop often. And how did you? I mean, you're like 23 years old, right?
I wish. I'm 31. Actually,
you're 31.
I'm 31.
Oh, okay. You look great for 31. I'm thinking that you.
No, it's funny, because I got my hair still on, my hairline's still here. I'm all right. I still can get around on the stage. So a lot of times people think I'm super duper young, but I'm not that young.
Okay, so when you talk about high school, you're really talking about 15 years ago almost.
Yeah, when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, when I was starting to really like experiment with hip hop and stuff, the people that were Eminem and 50 Cent were kind of at the top, and then Kanye came right at that time. Those artists were emerging while I was growing up.
Right.
But even then, I was still listening back to. I listened to Wu-Tang. I listened to Nas. I listened to Lauryn Hill. A lot of Tupac.
Right. So the year of your birth would have
91,
been the golden era of hip hop, 92 and all like
and
that.
And I always look back into that stuff because I think that's there's some things that like you just can't make up. I mean, you see that in other people's lives, like Tupac, right? His I gotta watch this new documentary about him, but his family, his mother had him in his womb fighting on trial. That you can't make up. That's gonna influence how this person is gonna be. So I look back and I'm like, I was born in 1991. At the same time, that was when there was the Rodney King that same year, right? That issue. And so I like to look back and see why am I like this, right? Why do I? And so I was born on this cusp. A lot of times I get these comparisons to like J. Cole, who was maybe around 2 or 3 years older than I am.
A middle child, J. Cole.
Yes. I feel like that because I'm like, look, like, we have to celebrate what all these people, these pioneers did, and what, like, music today. There was a time when hip hop wasn't in the conversation at all. Hip hop wasn't popular at all. Now it is the most popular in all countries. There's people in Germany, there's people in Switzerland making rap music, right? This started in the Bronx in the late 70s, early 80s. And so, you know, to and I look at it like jazz. And jazz is it's kind of a hard thing to figure out, because you know, jazz is a tradition. You pass that on. You learn, you pass that to someone else.
Yeah.
You learn, you pass that on. And I heard this from a jazz musician, Kamasi Washington, and he said, "There's heritage and there's lineage, right?" So, John Coltrane, to him, he's really big today. Kamasi Washington. John Coltrane is part of his heritage, but these other, like Christian Scott and all these other contemporaries in his field right now, those are part of his lineage, right? That's part of kind of his close relatives, right? These are my distant relatives. But there's always a direct line to that. You could stem something back to that. So maybe today, you know, we were talking about the message, right? We talk about Sugar Hill Gang and we talk about KRS-One. We might talk about, if you're from Brentwood, you talk about EPMD. Would you get the sense of those artists in what I do, the way that I'm saying it, you know? So I think that I gravitated to artists like Kanye, like J. Cole, because I felt a direct lineage in their art to people in the past, especially with Kanye sampling all these people from the Motown era, right? Because we all love Stevie. And Stevie Wonder is one of my biggest inspirations, which is why I play so many instruments too. You know, so like, it's always been a mission of mine to celebrate by incorporating, I guess. Celebrate by incorporating, right? The same way we build statues. That's pretty much what I'm doing in my artwork, right? It's building a statue. It's like, you know, I honor that. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for these guys. I didn't make this up. I learned from these guys, right?
And you mentioned earlier when we were talking off camera about some of your influences and even some perspective that you got on Tupac and what Shock G said. Mention that.
Okay, yeah. So I was just watching it. I watched it a while ago, maybe like right before Shock G passed away. But I was actually talking to a friend about it recently. And in this interview, he was explaining how different artists have their flows, and it's because of a certain thing. Like we talk about Biggie Smalls, and if you ever watch like one of his documentaries, he talk about how his neighbor in the projects was this really profound jazz drummer, and he kind of like took him under his wing, was showing him all these jazz songs and saying like, you gotta, you know, take from these drum rhythms, you know. And so when Biggie rhymes, he has this swing to it, right? When he rhymes, like it was all the dream. I used to read Bird Up magazines, and it's kind of delayed, like a drum. There's a swing to it, right?
And sometimes remember people had shades and corn
braids.
braids.
There you go, right? And then you have Tupac who you know, who emulate his voice. He's kind of holding out his words like this when he talks, and he was saying that he thinks, or Shock G thought, that Tupac was pulling from Martin Luther King, and when he, you know, gave his sermons and his speeches, right? I have a dream that one day, and he's
You can hear something that is akin to that.
And it might not even been intentional. It might have been subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Probably was. Probably wasn't even. You know. And I know for myself when I rap too, right? I don't tend to have this like now we have trap and drill, and we have this flow like it's a little more fast paced. I still tend to make or want to rap like in this flow like Nas or this flow like Rakim because that's what I grew up listening to. I'm just, and it's subconsciously. And then that, I know that when I can realize that, then I could try to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and try something a little different, right? Because that's the thing. There's a fine line between paying homage and being a traditionalist. And I think sometimes being a traditionalist won't allow for innovation, won't allow for creation. We have to ultimately be creative and allow for creativity in the arts.
Yeah.
And not, the more rules that we put on it, the less it becomes art.
Right, because you don't want to be put into a box like Dudley raps like these for who to be distinguished from these people who rap like this.
Right.
You want to be, you want to have your own.
I would say multi-dimensional.
Right, right. Now let me ask you this: is hip hop as a culture and as a business?
Yeah.
Do you have to work full time, or are you able to use your music to earn?
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do. Okay. I've gotten better at it. It's something that it's just like any business, except the only problem is that it's much harder because no one ever told me that this is possible. And it's once you do it, once you start to realize, oh, there's a budget for these things.
Yeah.
There's ability, and like a lot of times I even go and I workshop at schools and I perform at schools. The schools have budgets to bring in different people to present things, and that's a whole nother world of income. And I heard, who was it? I heard this interview and someone said, don't think about how much money you want to make. Think about how many people you want to serve and how you want to do it, right? So when we first think about this, we might think about how do I serve myself? Then you might start to think, okay, how do I serve the people that listen to this music? But then you don't realize, oh, how can I serve the youth community? How can I serve, you start to broaden the possibilities of it. So I've done a lot of things. I teach privately.
What do you teach? The instruments?
Yeah. So I have saxophone students, piano students, guitar students, clarinet students, flute students.
Wow, that's great.
And originally I started doing that. I was working in a music school, where when you are a music store, and in those scenarios, usually you split the fee for what you're doing. So then I left there,
and then you charge a certain amount, but
the school takes a
portion, and you get a portion.
Pretty big portion because you're using their space. They're bringing you all the clients, and they're handling the booking, all that stuff. Okay. And then it's like, wait, I can handle the booking. Yeah, that's fine. That's not that hard. And actually, it's better because now I can make my own schedule, and I can do it freely. And not only is it going to be more convenient, but now I can make my own rate, and I could get all of that. Or if it starts to build up more, I could say, I need an assistant, and I could pay them part of that rate, but not nearly as much I was paying for the assistance of the store, maybe, right? That's an example of how to dissect something and figure out how to make money from it, how to, and I also realized there are some jobs I take up just to make money. Like I'll even do weddings, I'll play at weddings and things like that. And I know that that's not something that I really want to do long term, but I know that it's going to help me free up my time so that I can work on the things to allow me to do that long term.
Earning your leisure.
Right. Yeah. And you have to also be patient, because maybe my rate for lessons are this, but it can evolve to that. My rate, because when you're young, you don't realize, hey, I remember when I was in school and this kid told me he took sax lessons for $50 an hour. I was like, geez, oh my God, was his parents rich? Oh my gosh. And then I get to teaching now, and I'm like, that's not enough. I should be charging $70 an hour. And then you realize, hey, there's a guy who's touring across the country that's playing jazz festivals, and he's charging $300 an hour for his lessons. No one's taught me that. I have to learn those things, and I think that's the difficulty of it, is that all things are possible. Anything you can make money doing, literally anything, but like I told you earlier, I know that I want to better my community. I want to do music, and I want to figure out how to do that for the rest of my life. So unfortunately, or fortunately, money is a factor in that, right?
Yeah.
So I humbly am not doing that full time. I was for the past 4-5 years, but the pandemic came around, and I lost a lot of income. And I was already working out of the red in a way. So, and I'm going further, so right now I picked up a part-time gig, and I'm starting to figure out how can I, if something like this happens where I have to, stop or slow down, do I have another form of making money? Because the thing that was happening during the pandemic, things were stopping, things were slowing down. So now I'm having to take jobs for a lesser rate, almost out of desperation. And what happens is that now I'm training people to treat me in this way, right? I don't want to be paid that way. I don't want to do that, right? Unfortunately, I have to. But if I have this other income, now I can say no. Someone told me about the power of no, right? And having leverage, gaining leverage, right? So that you can say no to the things that you really don't want to do, right? We all have to do certain things to an extent. We have to be humble in that sense. But and I'm I had to humble myself and find another avenue of income and sacrifice my time right now to get kind of out of that red zone for a little while. But I don't want to do that for my art. I don't want to do that for my music. I don't want to be misrepresenting myself because I need to make money right now. So I'll have to figure out a different way to make money so that I don't have to diminish my standards, I guess, for myself. Yeah.
I mean, in some way, it's a victory in itself that you're able to use music as a whole to make money, because even if not from performances or like that, it's still a victory that you don't have to, let's say, go work at Champ Sporting Goods 34 hours a week in order to earn $400 so that you can then have to do this on the weekends. At least you are able to earn money from what you love doing. So
I'm very blessed and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because I used to, my first jobs, and for a while I was working in a grocery store. I hated it. And I was still, I remember I was walking around writing rhymes on a cardboard box while I'm shelving, putting stuff on the shelves. But I don't want to do that, but I had to do that. So figuring out how to not have to do that was a big achievement. So I'm grateful for the fact that I'm able to make much more income than I did, years back.
Hit us with one more verse before we go.
Okay. Let's see. Let me think. All right. I'll spit another verse from. I'll spit a more optimistic verse. I had this EP I wrote recently. It's called "Rely on Me," and I wrote it while reflecting on a lot of my personal relationships with my family and my friends. So one of the songs I wrote is called "Thank God." It's mostly about my families. So it starts as it starts. I wake up early in the morning, birds chirping in the nest, right outside the window of the room that I rest. I'm a little superstitious, I guess, but I got a feeling that I won't be feeling no stress. I'm so blessed, simply for the reason that my heart is still beating and my lungs are still breathing. My little niece just started to grow teeth and my grandma beat cancer, so that means she's not leaving. I feel like God is looking down at me. What's it say? Wait. Hold on.
All good.
This is not leaving. I feel that God is looking out for me, throwing blessings down on me. I guess he's looking out for me. I feel his presence from everyone who's surrounding me. And when the times is tough, I know that it's just alchemy. Because you can't make gold without pressure. And on this road, it might test you. But if you're feeling low, I won't let you. Because I know how much that God blessed you. I want to thank God for waking me up. I want to thank God because he gave me so much. I want to thank God because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here at all. So that's one of the verses from that. And it's just about gratitude. And there's no antagonist in that one, right?
Right.
So I love trying to figure out how to make stuff that's empowering, that's positive, right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to always talking about our struggles. That's definitely part of it, but I have another dimension of like I want to wake up happy. I want to be grateful. So
if people want to reach you for performances, to learn more about what you do, what are your social media platforms or anything that you want to give?
The best way is on my Instagram. It's DUDLEY_music, Dudley Music. Or my website is dudmusic.com, DUDMUSIC.com. But I'm as I told you, I'm an open book. So and I enjoy, the big thing. The KRS-One always says, "Each one teach one." Right? That's a big, motto in the hip hop community. So I always encourage people to reach out. I'm very accessible now. I'm not on the Grammys yet. I'm not so definitely don't be afraid to reach out and ask anything, inquire about anything.
I appreciate you being here, and you're very talented, and I wish you much success in this game.
I appreciate the love, and thank you for having me. It's been a blessing just to share with you and your listeners, so thank you.
A pleasure, man. Help to Adjust presents If Testimony Was a Person. That was Dudley Music. Please like, subscribe, share. Check out the whole interview on YouTube if you're seeing the clips, because, there's a lot of great content there. Peace and love. We'll connect.